Welcome to the Wellness Amazon podcast. This is a podcast for highly sensitive people, people that have high intuition and are just in tune with themselves and the outer world. Come and listen to multiple different high spectrum subjects and just peek behind the curtain. But I warn you, once you peek behind the curtain, you can never go back. Have fun. Enjoy. Hey, everybody. Welcome to a new episode of the Wellness Amazon podcast with a super special guest today. I am extremely excited about this episode. I have been waiting for this like a little kid in a candy shop, I have to tell you. It is Heidi from Alaska. We have known each other for a couple of years now, mutual friends, and she is a certified personal trainer, a nutritional coach, a transformational specialist. I have to look at my list because it's so much. You know so much. A female hormone health specialist, and she owns Anchor Point Gym in Alaska and her Changing Tides Fitness and Nutrition business in Alaska as well. So she is working with people every single day to better their lives, better their lifestyle, get healthy, get fit. And today we're going to talk about the connection between highly sensitive persons and ADHD and how this is connected. So, Heidi, I know this started with you sharing a while ago something on Instagram, and I saw it, and it totally changed my life because I didn't know that female ADHD is so incredibly different than male ADHD, and a whole light bulb went off. So, how did your journey start with all of that?
I honestly did not know anything about ADHD. I had never heard about it, nothing until my son started acting up in school. So when he was 7 years old, he couldn't sit still. He was too wiggly. He was just a little bit out of control. He wasn't listening well. So his teacher said, have you ever had him, checked for ADHD? And I'm like, it's not my family. We don't do that. Right. It's like, no, we don't. So I kind of let it go, and it was hard. And then a parent told me, she said, oh, my son actually sees this practitioner because he was diagnosed with ADHD. So I thought about it a little bit more, and we decided to bring him in and get a consultation with the doctor. And sure enough, he was diagnosed with combined ADHD, which combined ADHD includes the impulsiveness, and then it also is the hyperactivity. And if you were to put my son on a spectrum of not being that much to really at the far end, he's at the far end of ADHD. So it's been a lot of years of trying to learn how to manage and how to navigate those waters. And it's been very, very difficult. But with that being said, after 7 years with his doctor, I started talking to her about some of the issues that I was having. And she said, wait, how old are you? And I said, well, I'm in my mid-40s. And she said, well, maybe you should come in and let's talk. So what I found out is that I also have ADHD, and it begins presenting in women during their perimenopause years, even more because of the hormonal shifts in our body. So I got an official diagnosis last May, so it's been over a year of ADHD. His doctor even looked at me right in the eyes and said, how in the heck have you been managing all these years without some sort of intervention or treatment plan? And I was just like, I don't know. So I've taken the last year and I've learned so much about why women present differently than men, especially during those perimenopausal years. And yeah, so that's basically my journey. It's just been navigating, reading, understanding, forgiving, and finding grace with myself and asking for help.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. And I mean, we're going to get into that all, but I did the same what you did, diving deep, getting all the podcasts, going to my osteopath and saying, I have this, I saw this thing. Can we talk about this? And she said, Well, you are this is the funny thing. She sometimes puts things together where you're like, "What? Really? Is that connected?" And, I'm hypermobile, so or people
Mm,
call it double jointed, whatever you wanna call it, right? And
right,
she
right.
goes, "A lot of times, hypermobility is connected to some sort of usually it's ADHD." And I
Hmm.
thought, "Huh." And then in this house, everybody has ADHD, somewhat diagnosed, but me, because I never thought about this. And it was the same
Hmm.
thing as for you. Perimenopause, hormones change, and out of a sudden, it's impacting my life. And
Right.
then, we started talking about this and options and testing and whatnot. I still yet have to get tested, by the way, but that's a whole nother podcast about our broken
Oh,
healthcare
sure.
system.
Sure.
Yeah. We're looking at like $6,000 or something like that, where I'm like, wait, yes. So we were talking about how your symptoms started presenting themselves.
Hmm. So you okay, so yeah, so throughout my whole adulthood, I always felt like something was off. I would have highs, I would have lows. I never could really understand what the triggers were. As a matter of fact, part of what women deal with is that we are often misdiagnosed with a depression or an anxiety, and then we are treated as such by medical professionals, or we see therapists or whatnot to work through the anxiety and the depression. So I actually had been on medication, Wellbutrin, Lexapro, Abilify.
Mhm.
I was on that for years and years and years. Did I really have depression and anxiety? Probably as a result of the ADHD manifesting, and that was how it manifests. So, but my symptoms would be, gosh, some of them would be like total paralyzation. When I get overwhelmed, I get completely paralyzed where I can just stand in a room and I know I have everything, but I physically cannot move and I don't know what to do about it. Um, Other symptoms that I have would be definitely deflecting. That whole doom scrolling going on, I would scroll for hours just to try and detach from everything else, trying to get that dopamine hit, if you would, if you know, you could say. Um, Other symptoms that I have, there's a condition called like ADHD rage, and so that would be when something just kind of sets you off, and it can be something so insignificant, just somebody interrupting, or maybe like a couple like taps on a desk or something, and you're like, ah, it just it sets you off. So if those were kind of some of the little things that I noticed that just didn't seem normal, the reactions that I would have. And then when I would get stressed out, holy cow, Amazon can see me coming, because I would spend so much money
Mhm.
on crap I don't and didn't need. I would be, oh, I need to have this deck of cards because it has a flower on it. Did I need a deck of cards? No, but I would buy three. I would get into spending issues, and you'll find that with some other people too. They have other addictions, so to speak. They would reach towards, maybe gambling could be a coping mechanism. Maybe, you know, uh, sex could be a coping mechanism. A lot of different things. Mine happened to be spending money and shopping.
Mhm.
So that was one of the things that I noticed that I would do when I'm going through a ADHD low. And now that I recognize that, I can almost head it off. It's kind of crazy. But those would be a few of the things that I recognized in myself.
Mhm. Wow. And I think the crazy thing is when I hear you talk, my brain goes immediately to how I would put myself down when those things happened.
Oh
Like
yeah.
the paralysis. What is wrong with you? You're so lazy.
Yeah.
Right? I would label myself as lazy.
Totally. And you know what? And you're not lazy though. So what you're actually fighting with is just I actually wrote notes on that. Let me find those, because that is something that we do punish ourselves for. We feel that we're lazy, but we're actually trying to manage an underfueled executive brain. is what's happening there. Our nervous system is like almost under siege from stress. And so we just don't know how to move through that. When I work with clients that have ADHD or issues similar to this, we make a plan. What is your reset plan? What is the evacuation plan? Whatever we want to call it. When you recognize that you are in that position, you have a plan written out, and I will pull up my piece of paper, my plan, and say, okay, when I'm paralyzed, I'm going to give myself 10 jumping jacks. Let's just get that brain out of that pattern for the moment. Um, if I have a list, what is the easiest thing that can be accomplished on that list right now? And maybe that could be walking from this wall to that wall, if that's on the list. You know, it's about taking small, tiny steps to start breaking that habit or breaking that pattern. So, yeah, you're not lazy. Your brain is just like underfueled from all the good stuff. And we need to try and figure out a way to jumpstart that back into action.
Yeah, that is a great tip. And it also makes sense why I make so many lists.
Oh, yes. How many notebooks or journals have you bought thinking that that was the one? This is the one that's going to change my life. Yeah.
It's not just I wish it was just notebooks. No, I keep when junk mail, I keep the envelopes or like the
Right.
envelopes that are in the envelope so you can send something back and you don't need it. I will keep
Right.
those because I will have a list on that thing. And then it
Right.
becomes a problem. It becomes a paper pile of probably 15 inches high at least.
Sure.
Yeah. Mhm.
So that would be when we would put a plan together, when you start seeing those hot spots starting to accumulate. Okay, we know that that's happening. We're recognizing it. We know why it's happening. What is that first step to address it in a positive way?
Yeah. And actually address it, not dumping it in
Actually
the
address
dumping
it.
room. Uh-huh. Yeah. Uh-huh.
Exactly. Yeah, you can't move one hotspot to another hotspot. We got to actually apply ourselves. Yes. Yes.
What? I'm the queen of moving dumping points to dumping
Yes.
rooms.
Oh, I know. I'm looking at a desk across the room right now, and I'm like, huh, that thing's been sitting there like that for quite a long time now.
Mhm. Mhm. And I know so many women that do that. Not a single guy. Not a single guy who does that. I
Yeah.
don't know.
Yeah, I would have to think on that one too, for sure.
Yeah.
And that's part of how women present differently. So men are typically more hyperactive and impulsive in their symptoms, like fidgety,
Mhm.
disruptive, jumping here to there. Now, I say that's typical. Now, that is not across the board for every human on this earth, but just the differences that, have been seen. That's how men typically present. Women, we are typically inattentive. We're a little bit more daydreamy, definitely more disorganized, forgetful. Oh my gosh, forgetful. I think I am up and down my stairs from the car to inside the house no less than 4 or 5 times a day because I forgot my keys. I forgot my phone. I forgot to grab my lunch. I forgot, why can't I just get it all in one go? I never can, ever. So that is so yeah, so men, that's when they present differently than women, and that is part of that difference.
Yeah. It's so funny because in like in Germany, I grew up in Germany with mainly women. The running joke in the female household was what you don't have in your head, you have in your legs. Meaning, if you can't keep it together up there, you just have to run more.
Oh, nice.
It was a running joke
Yeah,
because they all did it.
it's
Everybody did it.
yeah, right.
Hmm.
Yeah, no,
And
that's so true.
yeah, I was talking to a friend of mine who she was also on the podcast, and she is a major in psychology, and she works in actually a facility where they test people all day long, pretty much.
Hmm.
And even they know that testing needs to be very intricate when there is these special symptoms with anxiety and depression because they're all intertwined so much that you have to see is it really ADHD or is it anxiety or is it anxiety,
Right.
or is it ADHD? It's really hard to differentiate sometimes. And yeah, I got misdiagnosed so many times.
Right.
And then also at the same time, I think when the onset happened, I didn't have burnout yet, and I started
Hmm.
getting anxiety symptoms, but I thought, I've never had anxiety in my life. Why is this
Right.
happening now? But it was around that like perimenopause time, and I was a little earlier because I have PCOS, so it all happened earlier in my like
Hmm.
mid 30s. Um and then I got massive burnout years later on top of that. So now I cannot even know anymore. Well, do I have brain fog today because of my hormones? Because I have burnout? Because I'm
Mm.
stressed? Because I have ADHD? Where is it? What is the root cause? And how do I deal with that if you don't even know where it's coming from and what's causing it? So I think for women, it is just extra difficult because we're always changing, right? With our hormones,
Oh
we're
yeah.
always, you can never pinpoint us really. Men are so much easier to diagnose with anything because they're just so much more stable in their hormones.
Right. And that's true. So when it comes to those hormones, estrogen modulates dopamine. And so that can affect those ADHD symptoms. So many women do report that those symptoms actually they get worse in the days before their period because that estrogen starts to drop during that time frame. So that also applies to pregnancy when the estrogen is a little bit lower too. And it especially in perimenopause and menopause, when our hormones are fluctuating so much, we don't know when we're going to have the highs and the lows of those hormones because now the periods are irregular. And if you aren't on HRT, where you know that things are being normalized, leveled out, I should say, then yeah, it's that drop in estrogen can play a part in that too. So watching the cycle and understanding what your cycle's doing can potentially be a good tool to help management.
Yeah. Yeah. I put a little chart in my office where I don't know, found it on the internet, I Googled it. But I printed that chart of how your hormones usually look like during your
Hmm.
cycle, and then I made myself a little note like this is the luteal phase, and this happens during this, and even how to
Yes.
work out with my cycle
Yes.
and how to, you know, potentially you're I don't know more insulin sensitive during this time, so watch the
Exactly.
carbs, and here you have to eat more carbs and stuff like that. And it's very helpful, and I can still tell, and I track everything. I track
Yeah.
everything. Every symptom, every whatever it is, everything that is connected to that I track, and it does
Right.
tremendously help.
It
Yeah.
does help. Yeah, it does help just to kind of see what's going on. And then over time, you understand your body enough that you can really tune into it and understand without looking at your tracker, being like, this is exactly where I'm at right now. So yeah, the hormones definitely play a part in the women's side of that ADHD for sure. For sure.
Yeah. Wow. What were some other struggles where you knew that I have to get help? And then what happened after you actually went to someone who was specializing in that?
Mm.
How did that all change your life?
It's a good question. So see, here I am. I have to dig again because I often forget about, I'm like, oh, that goes into object permanence, which we can talk about in a little bit. But I can't remember exactly what the first indication was that I needed to speak to someone. But I remember the feeling that I had. I felt like I was constantly always overwhelmed, constantly in fight or flight, and I just could not figure it out. I felt like there were 10 people screaming in my head all the time, and I needed someone to help me sort it out. So I spoke to my son's practitioner, who actually only worked primarily with pediatrics, but because she had been on our whole journey with our family with him for so long, she agreed to take me on, and I was so thankful. um we I sat down with her and we talked. I think my assessment to discover whether or not I was ADHD took over 2.5 hours. She was very thorough. And after she said, yes, this is what you have, then she suggested that I try a stimulant medication to see how that would help. Because we know that ADHD is you're deficient in that dopamine in your brain. So what the stimulants do is that they release more dopamine. And so in an ADHD brain, it brings you back up to normal levels of dopamine. That
Mhm.
is one of the main reasons that they are used. Um, so we played around with a few dosages of Adderall, and we found a good dosage for me. And that was the beginning of starting to feel normal again, where I could
Mhm.
focus on everything, where I can actually start a task and finish a task, because I would just everything would be unfinished, everything in my life, and I was reaching burnout very quickly. So um, yeah, so that was how. And what was the last part of your question? Sorry, Steve. Like, no, no, no.
No, no, I totally get it. How I actually you answered it because I think
Okay,
again, I also don't remember. I think the last part of my question
I
was
know, right? That's
um how your life changed after you
how
went to
is it?
someone and yeah.
Yeah. So what I thank you. See, that's part of it too. I can go off and I'm like, shoot. So it's just a side note. Whenever I'm working on my computer or when I'm doing work that needs, I am back and forth between screens. And by the time I get to the other screen, I'm like, wait, what did I just read? I don't remember. It's
Mhm.
whatever. I just accept it at this point. Yeah. So how my life has changed. So I jumped right into my research. That was number one. I've always thought knowledge is power. The more I understand what's going on, the easier it is to, number one, accept it and then manage it. So I jumped right into my research to learn what is going on in my brain. Then I started implementing small practices within my bubble, I guess, to identify when I'm having a struggle and how to get out of it. Um, my number one that I can think right now is that my husband's been my biggest supporter, and oh my gosh, he's wonderful. So when I'm in a state of that ADHD paralyzation, first thing I do is that I call him or I get a hold of him, whatever. And I said, okay, I am paralyzed right now. What do I do next? And he can attest that I've called him a lot with that exact sentence. So he'll be like, well, what have you done today? What do you have planned? And then he would just give me a task. He's like, okay, you're going to do this. And having him tell me that this is the next step breaks me out of that paralyzation. Um, on my TikTok, I posted the 10-minute rule. That was his rule that he gave me that I shared with everyone else. I was having a hard time. I said, I cannot physically do this right now. He's like, do 10 minutes, just 10 minutes and see how you feel after 10 minutes. And after 10 minutes, I was able to complete my task and I completed it well. So I'm implementing practices to help me get through the hard parts.
Mhm.
I love lists. Lists are great too. And I only keep them in one spot now.
Can I ask you, do you think when he does that with you that it takes the burden of the making a decision out of you because he is making the decision for you and then you can do the task but you do not in your brain have to decide between 5,000 different options.
Yeah, it absolutely, it definitely helps. He's also a problem solver. That is just his nature. And so if I go to him with a problem, then he wants to help me solve it. And so that's been a really good for both of us. But yes, it does. When I have someone telling me what to do, then it'll get done. It's my own fight with my own brain and all those, crazy sounds that I'm hearing going on that prevents me from doing anything because I just get so overwhelmed. So helping offload that a little bit makes it possible for me to get stuff done.
Yeah. I
I know. It's crazy. I mean, I never thought
It
that I would be in that position, but yeah, I am, and I'm still learning all about it for sure.
yeah. I'm just so floored because I see the parallels, what is happening with me, but I was on a completely different journey. And before we recorded this, and obviously people don't know that, we were chit-chatting a little bit what we have
Hmm.
done, and I'm talking about, and that was also a subject in other episodes where we talk about like that female energy, and I'm trying to be more in that female energy. And I have actually had to go through stuff and learning to let my spouse do more of the male energy stuff, and that
Mm.
has done more help than anything else. But it was so difficult for me to let go, just to give him a little
Oh
bit of
yeah,
control. And we joke around with traveling. He now calls me the passenger princess, and I love that title, by
perfect,
the way. I'm totally the passenger
perfect.
princess. It's things where I let him just do. I remember we went to Texas to see our mutual friend, by the way.
Oh, oh,
And
great.
we that was the first trip ever. I Because he travels a lot. I mean, it was a non-brainer actually to let the guy do it, but I was so rigid, and I
Yeah,
always be like, "We need to be early at the airport, and we need to do this, and da da da, and TSA, and da." And for the first time, I was like, "You know what?
let it
You do
go.
it. You
Let
do
it
it."
go. Yes.
And was it glorious?
Oh,
Was it
totally.
glorious? I was still in control. If I would have said no, it would have not happened. That's not it.
Absolutely.
But
Hmm.
he was like, "Okay, now we're going to do this. And this is where we're going to stand in line. And I have the tickets and I have the passports and you just relax." And I thought,
This is nice.
okay. And then my brain was just so, I can't say smooth because smooth brain is bad, but I was smooth. I was in a
Right.
smooth energy, and I was then
Totally.
able to focus on totally other things, which now that it's almost like that brain fog lifted a little bit, and I was in a better mood. And I thought, this is just not doing these. I don't know how many decisions are connected to this. Maybe like 200 decisions if you really go through all of the little stuff that your
Hmm.
brain has to go through, right? Was such a huge lift. And now that you're talking about this, how, your husband is a problem solver, mine is too. But I think that's their default probably sometimes, right?
Oh,
They're
sure.
more like problem solvers and we're more like the listeners and empathy. Um, but I appreciate that because, like
Yeah.
you, I need someone to pull me out of this, and I am overwhelmed with decisions. I was actually with our mutual friend just talking about how these hot spots that you talked about, these hot
Yeah.
spots and these hotspot rooms, they are not a problem for me because I don't have the time or the energy or whatever to actually do the task. No, 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 no. Every item that I touch, I have to make a decision. Is this
Right.
decluttered? Where's your home? Do you have a home? Do I have to make you a home? Do you live in a drawer? Do you have a box? All of these decisions that I have to make now about one item, I have to do 150 times. That is
Oh,
now
right.
where I get the paralysis that you're talking about, where I'm like,
Yep.
I'm going to shut the door. And I'm like, I can't do it.
Yep. Out of sight, out of mind. Yeah. And then,
Yeah.
but the opposite is true too. I will tear through a room and I will throw everything out without looking at it because you just get, yeah. So there is no like middle ground. There really isn't. It's either you have to be in all or nothing so here's another good strategy for that. It's give yourself 3 minutes. And I know, I mean, every woman I've talked to has done something similar, setting that timer and saying, I'm going to do this for this amount of time. I call that like speed cleaning. I'm going to get the kitchen done in 10 minutes, and set the timer and I'm going to fight that timer to beat it. Right. Um, but setting that timer is a really good strategy to say, okay, that hot spot right there, it gets 3 minutes of my attention. And then once that timer goes off, you have to like back off and that's it. That's it.
Yeah.
So that can help. But going back into what you were saying about letting your husband kind of take the reins on the travel. That is one of the coping strategies that women with ADHD have. We are looking at that, perfectionism, total control, overcompensation, all of that. Those can be things that we have to have in place for us to feel okay. Total control. That is often why um, women have issues with eating disorders, because that food is one thing that women can control. And now, again, this is not exclusive just to women. I know men that have had eating disorders, but in this terms, we can control food. Um, we have higher rates of emotional dysregulation, overwhelm, shame, rejection, sensitivity, all of that, extra the feelings about that hotspot, extra big feelings. There's just it's hard to regulate emotions.
Yeah.
Yeah, that one's a hard one. But yeah, I definitely I love handing the reins over to my husband and being like, okay, you do this, because really, when has it gone wrong? Really? I mean, really
Yeah.
never. It
Yeah.
always works out. So yeah, it's good. It's good that he's chill.
Yeah. And my counselor always said to me, when were talking about these, but what if, because I get into the what if very, very badly.
Yeah,
And
can't do it.
yep, he would say, okay, great. What is the absolute worst outcome of that situation? Paint me a picture. And I would be like, well, realistically, this is the worst outcome. And he goes, okay, cool. Are you okay with that outcome? Is that the end of the world? Somebody gonna die? Or is this something you can recover from fairly quickly? Yeah, it's okay. I guess I would be okay with that. And like, okay, how am I feeling about that now? Well, okay, it's not,
Exactly.
you know, but
Right.
you have to
Yes.
sometimes have somebody from the outside to rein you back out there. I have a question for you
Sure.
because you said total control. And again, I mean, if you see me, I'm sitting here, I'm nodding the entire time. Um, do you think that sometimes there's, or maybe you had it too, I don't know, that there is an impulse to not only control situations, but also control other people?
Oh, sure. Yeah. My kids would be a perfect example. Actually, you must do this in public. You have to behave this way. You have to do this, instead of just allowing them to be who they were or who they are. I was trying to tell them who they needed to be, because that made me comfortable. It made me comfortable if they behaved the way I wanted them to. Controlling other people. Yeah. So, if I'm going to have a party, I'm going to be the one to host the party. So I know it goes the way that I want it to go.
Mhm.
I'm very much a control freak in that way. And yes, I definitely wanted at one time to have people behave the way that I felt they should, because that made me feel good. And that gave me a sense of maybe a little bit of that dopamine hit. Who knows? But yeah, I did. Yeah, that one's actually been a hard one to kind of break free from, just to let things flow, because that control is definitely that's definitely, oh God, I don't know where I'm going with that, but yes, I can agree with you on that. I did at one point want to have everyone doing exactly what I wanted them to do,
Yeah.
my way or the highway.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
that's
I
not
we
how I
have
like it anymore.
yeah. We have in downtown here where we live, we have these really cute, and I'm sure you have that too, these cute shops with these cute wall signs and signs. Everybody
Oh,
loves signs, right?
sure.
And one of them said, I am a very flexible person. As long as everything goes exactly my way, I'm very flexible. And my husband pointed at that and said, look, that's you. And I said, but I don't want to be that way.
I
Um,
know, I don't like it
and
either.
my question to you is, Heidi, how, because I know how we women tick. When we talk about this casually here, and you open up my mind to all of these things that, hey, that's actually, it's part of this. It's not who you are. It is part of something you have, but it's not, you don't have to
Hmm.
identify with it. But I know that, to me, what I feel immediately when we talk about these things is I feel a little bit of shame, right? As like, oh gosh, I don't want to be that mom. I don't want to be that
Right.
wife. I don't want to be that person. I don't want to try to control people and situations and everything and all the time.
Right.
And I don't want to be obviously I don't want to be paralyzed either. And I don't want to not have quote unquote my together, right?
Sure. Hmm.
How, how do you do you have a coping mechanism of just that shame and that guilt that is coming with that?
So I've definitely experienced all that shame and that guilt. I am one of those people that replay conversations over and over and over again in my brain. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I sounded like a complete idiot, or they think I'm horrible, or what if I offended someone, and all of that. So yeah, I've definitely experienced that. And I probably experienced that. I'll probably even think about it after we're done and be like, did I say everything right? Did I do everything okay? Did I look all right? You know what I mean? It's just always
Yeah.
replaying all the time. So the way that I manage all of that is, I try and look at the big picture here. Number one, is everything around me still okay? Is everything fine? Everything is, then I also think about those people that maybe I've had that conversation with. And while I'm thinking of that conversation because I'm the one that experienced that conversation, I can guarantee you they're probably not giving me a second thought right now. They're off busy doing their own thing. So just because it's the center of my universe right now does not mean it's the center of anyone else's universe of that conversation or that experience. Um, and so to you just gotta give yourself grace, and just realize that it's not as big as your brain is going to make it out to be, because our brain is always going to uh, shift to the way that makes us feel safe. And, that way it's going to downplay everything. Oh, I'm not saying that correctly. Um, but no, the way I just manage that is just, try and take a deep breath, try and just let it go. And then I always talk to my husband about it. So this is what I said. What do you think? And he's just like, it's fine. You're fine. You're good. But managing it's just gratitude journaling. I do that a lot too, to try and, just work out some of my thoughts and that I'm grateful for things. And yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I know what I want to say, but it's not articulating. But yes, I get it.
No, trust me, the energy of whatever you wanted to say came over here because
Okay, good. Because I'm like, "Ah."
I totally get it. And the funny thing is, when I tell my husband about my overthinking, especially with conversations, he says exactly what you just said to me. He said, "Do you think they're thinking about that? Do you think so?" No, they're probably not. Why do you?
No.
You know?
Yeah.
And
Hmm.
okay, this gets me to the next one because obviously you had someone in your life in on your team, right? Let's just call it a team. You have
Okay.
your spouse, you have your kids that they understand this because your son goes kind of like through the same thing, a little bit
Hmm.
different. It's just it's a subject at home. It's not a taboo subject. Everybody knows, right? So that everybody is
Hmm.
exposed to it and can deal with it. And you had a great practitioner who guided you and said, "Okay, let's give you a treatment plan," right?
Right.
Um, what are some other things? Because I heard you say plan, and when I hear plan, obviously there was more than you know. We're going to try a medication, but there's also these coping mechanisms that we're giving you, right?
Right.
So, how did you do that yourself, or did this come from your doctor?
So, I did not actually see a therapist. So my doctor, my practitioner is just that. She is the medical side of all of it. Wonderful lady, great conversation with her, but she was not there to therapy me. I needed
Uh-huh.
to go see another therapist for that. I chose not to. Um, so when it came to the coping strategies, that just came out of the research. That just came out of a lot of reading and understanding what exactly is happening in the brain, and little tiny tips and tricks to address some of the issues that I have. So my forgetfulness is very, very high. As a matter of fact, I mean, I'm like, gosh, am I beginning early stages of dementia, forgetfulness? Seriously. I'm not. It is really a symptom of the ADHD. So I'm like, all right, now that I know this about myself, so I guess the first step would be to identify what you want to address in yourself. So in this case, forgetfulness. So I have implemented the strategy, and the moment something comes in my brain that I have to remember, I stop what I'm doing and I write it down. So how do I do that? I have a whiteboard on my fridge. I've got my notes in my phone. I've got a notebook in my backpack if I happen to have my backpack with me at the time. And I write things down. I was on the treadmill earlier today and I had to remember something. So I stopped the treadmill really fast and got on my phone for my notes and I wrote it in my notes. It happened in real time today. When I work with clients at my studio, all of them are familiar with how I operate. And so we will be working and I'll be like, 1 second, I just remembered something. And I'll run over to my desk on my piece of paper and I'll just quickly jot down what I needed to remember. And then we're back into the session. And so they've all been incredibly gracious with that. So identify what you want to work on. Um, if it that paralyzation again, when you know that that's going to happen, because it's going to happen, what strategies do you have in place? How do you cope with that? And so that is, again, I make a phone call. I do the easiest thing on my list first. I do the push-ups or the jumping jacks to kind of shock the system a little bit, then make the decision to move forward. Um, even identifying the spending issue. When I start spending, I'm like, oh, I must be in a low right now because I'm spending money again. And that is a communication with my husband. I'm like, all right, I'm feeling this urge to be spending a lot of money right now. So help me talk out what's going on. And if you don't have that in a spouse or a partner, find a friend. There are great ADHD specific therapists that are out there too, even online. There are ADHD coaches that you can hire that will coach you on how to manage your day or manage those symptoms that are the most difficult for you. My son is also in therapy and he has been given excellent tools to fit his specific situations that he deals with every single day. So
Yeah.
those are some of the ways that you can learn to cope with that, is by implementing small practices.
Yeah. I have really enjoyed Dr. Amen's books on ADHD. He's really good. He's like a brain specialist. And there is a podcast, and I'm trying to remember what it has a funny title. I think it is something like ADHD Women Kick Butt or something like that.
Oh, I think I've seen that. I haven't read that one, but I believe I've seen it.
Yeah. And the nice thing about podcasts, you can look at the titles and kind of go through and see, okay, what pertains to me and what doesn't,
Right.
not everything will. So was there anything lifestyle change wise or nutrition wise or supplements or anything like that where that supported you in that journey?
So, um, lifestyle, yeah, I definitely need to get activity. I need to get that movement every
Mhm.
single day. When my body is tired, then my brain tends to slow down just a little bit. When I have a perfect example, was it last night or the night before? I can't remember. I've got a big event coming up at the end of next week, and so I have a lot of nervous energy going. Well, last night or the night before, I could not sit still. I'm all over the place. I was like, I'm going to go to the gym, put in my music, and just get a workout with no plan. But I knew that moving my body and having that in my brain, in my music, I'm able to kind of just detach for a second from the situation, and I felt much better after. So, yes, my lifestyle changes, definitely getting daily movement, having a plan. So, people think I'm crazy when I say this. Having structure gives me freedom. When I have a structured life in place, that gives me freedom to breathe. So, what does that even look like? Today being Sunday, I'm going to meal prep. So now I don't have to think about my food for the rest of the week while I'm at work. I have my workouts planned. I've already worked on client files today, so I'm not going to be playing catch up throughout the week. So structure is key in a lifestyle if you want to have a more relaxed brain. Because I don't know about you, when I'm like trying to remember running from here to here to here to here, it is a recipe for disaster. Recipe for disaster. As far as supplementation goes, I'm sure that all of, so I work with a functional medicine doctor, and anybody who's not working with the integrative or functional medicine doctor, I highly encourage at least getting a consultation with one of them, because, they go to the root of the problem. So if you're dealing with, let's just say, anxiety, which we know anxiety can be neurological, but then also too, if you're imbalanced in your body in all your healthy areas, then that can present because your body's freaking out about something. So, with my functional medicine doctor, we're sure that all my supplements are on point. One of my supplements that I don't miss every single day, I have to have it, is my D3. D3 is very, very important. So I'm sure to get my high dosages of that, especially being in Alaska. Your fish oil is also really great for that cognitive, brain fog, inflammation. Inflammation can also present, in different ways too. So what does that even look like for people? Magnesium. Magnesium is huge. There's 800 different things that magnesium does for the body, but one of them allows better absorption of your nutrients. We want that absorption of the nutrients.
Yeah.
So those would be as far as where I work with clients is, getting them on those three. But, interestingly enough, when it comes to the ADHD side of things, saffron is starting to make really some big headway in the medical communities as being a really solid, natural way to support your ADHD life. I haven't looked into it completely at this time because I'm not currently taking that, but I have some studies pulled up on my computer that are showing that saffron is showing promise to help support an ADHD life. So that would be something I would look into.
Yeah. I started taking saffron because the lady who was taking the course that I'm telling you about with the whole female
Oh
energy
yeah,
thing, she's talking about saffron a lot because she said there are studies that the serotonin production, it totally by a landslide did better than Zoloft in studies. So it is just such a like a happy herb, and all of those neurotransmitters in the brain are getting fired
mm,
up with saffron. My mom used to work in a spice factory, so I know saffron
mhm.
fresh and how expensive it is and how
Right.
delicate it is. So I'm a big fan of that. I can tell the difference. And I wanted to say something about your structure. Structure means
Mm,
freedom. That
mm,
happened to me in a job interview where I was all about being very organized and structured, and I have everything always very together. And they were like, "Oh, yeah, well, you seem very rigid and like you cannot be flexible." And I said, "No, I am
yeah,
very flexible because I am that organized. Because when I have to pivot one room second to the other, you betcha that I'm not forgetting all the other 10 things that we actually had to do when we had to pivot
right.
because I'm organized." And the guy looks at me and goes, "Oh, yeah. Oh, that's
Yeah,
great." Of course, I got the job, you know?
right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
It
and
was,
it's the truth.
I absolutely 100% agree with you, and I can tell you that 2023, when I was really in a hole with my nutrition too, I was
Hmm.
not taking care of myself, I was not exercising enough, I had that temper tantrum little bit going on where I'm like, well, I also want to eat the croissant because everybody else can eat why can I not eat that
Right.
kind of thing?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
And I remember being in France, in Paris, of all places in the world where you're supposed to enjoy life and relax. And I had the absolute worst deliberating anxiety of my life. I
Yeah,
was at night pacing the hotel room, hyperventilating almost to the point where I thought I'm going to have a panic attack
right.
because I didn't take care of myself. So,
Yes.
mhm.
And that can be the body is letting you know if you are starting to experience that depression and anxiety and whatnot. I know that kind of goes off of the ADHD topic though, but look at the nutrition. There As in 20, well, let's see, in 2016 to 2020, I went through a really bad phase in life. I gained 100 pounds. I was really internally sick, borderline alcoholic, if not full blown alcoholic. It was horrible. But I had to make a choice. You know, is this how I want to live my life for the rest of my life? No. So I made a choice and I went through a complete elimination diet. I found good recipes to make up for what I was missing that were in the design of using whole foods. But I'll tell you what, once I was able to really just reset my body after 90 days of a really dedicated elimination diet, I was able to go off all my medication, my health. I lost so much weight because I didn't realize how inflamed I was. It was horrible. Yeah, but the clean eating, healthy lifestyle, and then eliminating what was hurting my body really reset it and set me up for success. So, I mean, I can relate to that for sure.
Yeah. Awesome. And when you were talking about magnesium, so I put it over here so because I have to read that. Threonate. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Magnesium three or L-threonate.
Okay.
Because somebody told me who has ADHD, very severe ADHD children and autism disorder children,
Hmm.
said that has changed their life. And it's definitely not cheap, it's not cheap, but I get it every month and I have to take 3 a day. And it's
Right.
apparently a special magnesium for your brain. Um, it keeps the brain fog down, I have to
Okay.
say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there were 8 or 9 types of magnesium out
Mm.
there. Yep, yeah, I can see that magnesium yeah, threonate, and of course I'm probably butchering it too. But yeah, if you can get a magnesium complex that has several different
Hmm.
types of magnesium in there, that's better. I mean, not saying yours isn't best, but just I don't know, I'm all about bringing in all that good stuff. Also, look through your nutrition too. Are you able to bring in magnesium through the foods that you eat too? That would be something else. But yeah, no, I'm all about just inundating the body with healthy things. Now, am I healthy all the time? Heck no. I still love to go
Right.
have my cheat stuff. And I wouldn't even call it cheat. I call it a life balance. You're just going to enjoy life. And with the picture of ending this life in a very healthy way. So,
Right. Right. Absolutely. No, I agree with that. Mindful enjoying something that's not in the healthy category or whatever you want to call it, but
right. I
it
know.
brings you joy in that moment and it's worth it. I always say,
Yes.
is that worth the calories? Oh, yes, it is.
Right. When I coach people with their nutrition, the first thing I say, so when we talk about the nutrition, I do get a lot of people that are like, oh my gosh, I have to, I can't eat this, I can't eat that. And I'm like, no, I will never, ever, ever, ever tell my clients that they cannot eat something. I said, what is the first thing that's going to happen? If you told me that, all right, Heidi, you don't ever get to eat brownies again because you're on a diet now, then the first thing I'm going to do is go down to the store and buy a 12 pack of brownies. And then I'm going to binge eat them in my car because it's the last time I'll ever eat brownies. I mean, there's nothing positive about that. And that's just starting a bad relationship with food and a negative association with food. So I always tell my clients, I say, I will never ever tell you not to eat something. You want brownies, you want to have that occasional alcoholic beverage with friends or pizza or whatever it may be. I said, just look at your whole day and say, how does this fit today? And again, just like you said, is it worth the calories? But on the opposite side of that, maybe on another particular day, you're like, well, not today, but on Friday, yes, it will be worth the calories. So it's all about finding that lifestyle that fits with your particular individual lifestyle. So yeah, I'll never tell anybody not to because that would be very hypocritical of me because I will eat the brownies. Probably warm with ice cream on them and whipped cream.
Right? Yes,
Yes.
absolutely. And it's the mindset of also, like, you get to I get to choose that healthy food over the brownie today, and then I get to eat the brownie.
Uh, yeah, it's just, we have one life to live. And so let's just do it the happiest we can be. And that's how that all integrates together.
Yes. Yes, it is, and then also not the whole guilt trip about it, because, again, that throws everything off again, and that's
Yeah.
stress hormones, and nobody needs that.
Right. And I think we could probably have a whole nother podcast about how I feel about, the guilt behind food, and where we come from as, generally speaking, again, the American society. What is healthy and what isn't healthy is
Yeah.
kind of misconstrued and not always 100% accurate when it comes to looking at the individual person. So yeah, that could, I mean, I could talk forever about that one.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, let's do it.
We should. I go on forever
Oh
and
my
ever.
gosh. This was
So,
so good. Is there any one last thing that we didn't cover that you wanna
mhm.
share or that you think somebody needs to hear?
Well, I did mention earlier when we were talking about, one other struggle that I do have with the ADHD, and that is object permanence.
Mhm,
What object permanence is, to put it the most simplest term possible, is out of sight, out of mind.
mhm,
If something is not in my face, then I will forget that it exists, temporarily speaking, right? Or I'm not going to think about that thing. Unfortunately, that, I believe, has harmed a couple of my friendships over the years, because some of the long distance friends that I've had, if I'm not actively thinking about them or seeing something about them, then I'm probably not going to reach out, because and it's not intentional whatsoever. It never has been. And then that friendship, there's two particular friendships I'm thinking of that have, kind of dissipated a little bit over time. I strongly believe that that was the reason why. It was just, that reason. So I just wanted to bring that up, because a lot of people see that as being mean or
mhm,
wrong, and but it's honestly just neither of those. It's just
mhm.
out of sight, out of mind. And I would have to say, of all the things with ADHD, that is the one thing I dislike the most. So I have to decide and implement practices to be sure that I check in with people that I love, because if I'm not thinking about you, then I'm probably not thinking about you. And it's has nothing, there are no malicious reasons behind it. It's just how it is. So that is one thing that ADHD people struggle with, is that object permanence. Unfortunately, that's one I hate the most.
You know, when we first started taking notes and you sent this to me, I had to Google it. I didn't know what it was.
Hmm.
And then, of course, Google was like, "Well, this is actually for babies and toddlers and blah blah." I'm like, "No, that's not what I'm looking for." And I had to dig a
Right,
little bit, actually, to
right.
find that in conjunction with ADHD. And then I thought, "Oh, that is why I have the piles, because I'm scared to put the pile away. Because if I do, I will not do the thing that I needed to do with that paper or that list or that coupon or that whatever it is, right? Because you're right. If I put it
Yeah,
away, I put it away. And with friends, I have had, like you, friendships struggle, but also because that person felt that they needed to express their disappointment in me very much, and then
hmm,
guilt tripping, which then I try to explain, like, no, no, I didn't know that it was something that had to do with ADHD. I was just
yeah,
like, I'm sorry, I don't know, I was just busy, and explaining it that way. And there's a lot of people in my life that just, it's not even a thing. It's like,
right,
if I talk to you once a year, they're like, "Oh, cool," and we just start, like nothing ever
right.
happened, you know. And there's no ill feelings on either side, where others get very, um, resentful about that, and then
Yes.
I felt that pressure, and then I
Yep.
felt that shame,
And guilt,
and that
because
was not.
you're not a good friend now. That guilt,
Mhm,
yes.
mhm,
I think the message I would just say to somebody out there who might be listening that knows that their friend has ADHD, or maybe they're experiencing it themselves, whatever, it's just um what I wish would have happened in those scenarios was that I wish that my friends would have said, "Hey, this is you're not communicating with me. You know, what's going on? You know, get tell me that that you are feeling hurt by my actions so that we could talk about it, or
mhm,
my lack of actions." Um, in one particular case, it was just a text message saying, "That's it, we're done. I'm not your friend anymore because you are just not there." And I had no idea, but had I known, then I would have actively tried to remedy that, and because I loved that friend. But, you know, I mean, it is what it is. Um, but ways to cope with that, if you find that that is something that you deal with, you know, again, visual systems, having that visual, maybe putting a picture of you two on the refrigerator, so that when you go to the fridge, you see you and your friend, you're like, oh, that's such a good time. And, you know, shoot a text or something, or make a phone
mhm.
call, or send a card, whatever that might be. You know, other things too, alarms, you know, maybe you two get together and say, hey, let's do a phone call every other week, Mondays at 5. And
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I love it. It's just it is so liberating. That's the word I want to choose. It's liberating and empowering to know that it's not there's nothing wrong with you in that sense, right? And what what you said in the very beginning, I want to pick on that too because we can't forget that is yes, why do we women walk around with that and still functioning, and how in the world are you functioning like this? Well, because we are just toughing everything out most of the time because well, uh-huh. Yep. Yeah. Yeah. Because you also had people all day and very highly functioning and socializing and paying attention. It's a lot. That's a lot. Yeah. 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 So anyone who's listening to this, go find someone who is supporting you on the medical side too, and I absolutely agree with what you said, functional, or like in my case it was my osteopath who is very functional. Osteopaths usually are. And get tested and also get blood tests done, you know, like you said, are there any deficiencies going on? You do not have to walk around with that and just yeah. Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that is fantastic. I'm gonna put that in the show notes so that people can just click on it. I'm gonna put your business Instagram site in the show notes as well. Um, if you're in Alaska and you need an awesome gym, obviously that's where to go, right? I still wear my necklace with the sea glass that you got from me. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Because it's green and blue and turquoise, and it helps the throat chakra, you know. Mhm. Yeah, I still have your wishing stones too. They're on our dining room table. They're always there. Yeah, yeah. It was so good to have you. Heidi, this was so good. This was I think this is going to help a lot of people. Yeah, and men and women because, you probably know someone in your life who has something that has something to do with what we talked about today in some capacity. So I really highly appreciate you, and I appreciate you coming on the show and giving us your time and your wisdom and your experience too, and being, vulnerable with me, and talking about challenges. Yeah. Yeah, I agree. All right, y'all. Thank you so much, Heidi. Y'all, see you see you next time. Thank you so much for being here with me today. I hope you enjoyed. You can give it a thumbs up, you can give it a review, you can share it with somebody you think might resonate with this. Have a great day. See you next time.